Friends, if you're a fan of powerful biopics, heart-touching stories, and legendary music, then don't forget to like this video. If you're visiting our channel for the first time, welcome. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss awesome movie content like this. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most unforgettable musical dramas ever made, the 2004 masterpiece, Ray. This film tells the inspiring true story of Ray Charles, a music icon who lost his sight at the age of 7, but went on to light up the world with his genius. We'll talk about what makes this film so special, where you can watch it, and some amazing behind-the-scenes facts you probably didn't know. From the Oscar-winning performance by Jamie Foxx to the unforgettable music that will have you tapping your feet, we'll cover it all. We'll also break down everything from the technical brilliance behind the camera to the soulful soundtrack, how this film was made from pre-production to post-production, the budget, the box office collection, and the awards this film bagged. Trust me, there were plenty of juicy details to share. Want to know who played who, which scene made people cry, and what makes this film not just a movie but a movement? Stick with us till the end because I've got all the juicy details for you. Let's get started with the incredible journey of Ray. This film will inspire you, move you, and remind you of the true power of music and determination. Ray, 2004, is not just a film. It's a deeply felt chronicle of pain, resilience, genius, and redemption, woven through a storytelling structure that mirrors the emotional complexity of its subject. Ray, director Taylor Hackford opts for a nonlinear narrative. Instead of following a rigid chronological sequence, he blends past and present, memory, and moment in a way that immerses the viewer in Ray's psychological and emotional reality. The result is a portrait that feels less like a biography and more like a lived experience. Music and memory, the film doesn't begin with Ray's birth or his rise to fame. Instead, we meet him as a fully formed artist on the verge of mainstream success, already blind and hardened by life. The audience is immediately drawn into a world of rhythm and sound, piano keys, soulful vocals, stage lights, but juxtaposed with fleeting, fragmented memories. These recurring visual flashbacks, often sparked by music or moments of isolation, serve as emotional anchors throughout the film. We aren't watching time pass. We're living inside Ray's consciousness. Childhood trauma, especially the death of his younger brother George and the loss of his eyesight, return like ghosts. These memories aren't simple narrative devices. They're haunting echoes that shape his every choice, whether he plays music, argues with producers, or shoots the heroine in a hotel room. The specter of his past lingers. One of the film's first major turning points occurs when young Ray loses his sight after witnessing his brother drown. Instead of presenting this as a singular tragedy, the film slowly peels back its emotional impact. The scene of his mother guiding him to survive without pity, "You're not going to be is powerful because it plants a theme that echoes throughout the film. Blindness is not weakness, and pity is not love. These early scenes, often interspersed with Ray's adult life, establish the central conflict. Ray's journey is not merely about achieving fame. It's about escaping the weight of shame, loss, and self-doubt. Blindness is never depicted as the obstacle. It's his grief, his fear of abandonment, and the scars of poverty and trauma that are harder to overcome. As Ray ascends to genius, he meets the industry. His rise in the music world is marked by both defiance and innovation. He refuses to be boxed in racially, musically, or emotionally. He confronts club owners, record executives, and fellow musicians with a boldness that is as much survival as it is creativity. Instinct, as it is talent, is evident in Ray's insistence on artistic freedom, exemplified by his demand to own his masters. This radical act of self-worth stands out in a system that constantly tries to exploit him. A pivotal moment comes when Ahmed Erdogan, played by Curtis Armstrong, signs Ray to Atlantic Records. This shift marks the beginning of Ray's journey as he starts forging a sound that blends gospel with R&B. This move, considered blasphemous by many at the time, ignites controversy and solidifies Ray's creative courage. This choice not only sparks controversy but also makes history, capturing the theme that true artistry demands risk and often rejection. As Ray's fame peaks, his personal life fractures. The film delves into the dark gravity of his heroin addiction, presenting it without romanticization. We witness him nodding off in dressing rooms, pushing away those who love him, and creating emotional chasms in his marriage. The most jarring scenes are not the drug use itself but the emotional aftermath. A callousness toward his wife, Della, the erosion of trust in his band, and a profound loneliness that underscores his every high. Ray's affairs, particularly with Margie Hendris, further complicate his character. These relationships are not sanitized. They are messy, often painful, but presented without melodrama. The film forces the audience to hold multiple truths. Ray is a genius and deeply flawed, broken and brilliant. Margie's death, another quiet but devastating moment, serves as a sobering reality check. She was more than a background character. She was a mirror to Ray's self-destruction. Her absence leaves a silence in the film that speaks volumes. As the narrative progresses, the past crashes into the present. The flashbacks become more insistent and disturbing, and Ray begins to hallucinate his brother, George. These visions are not mere memories but manifestations of guilt that has metastasized over decades. Powerful sequence at a hotel in Georgia. Ray suffers a breakdown here. The nonlinear structure pays off fully. Memories crash into his present, and he is finally forced to confront them. The emotional and thematic climax comes not with a performance or an award, but during Ray's decision to undergo rehab and confront his addiction in a dreamlike, surreal sequence within the detox center. Ray faces a vision of his mother and George for the first time. The flashbacks stop haunting him. They transform into acceptance. His mother tells him, "You always had the strength. It's not about being cured or perfect, but about choosing to live honestly." The final refrain, a vision beyond sight. The film's final scenes do not end with a dramatic concert or public redemption. Instead, they settle into something quieter. Ray Charles chooses to live with clarity, even if that means confronting his own pain. When he refuses to play segregated shows in Georgia, he does so not for headlines, but from conviction. This decision is understated in presentation but monumental in meaning. Ray Charles has finally internalized the worth his mother tried to instill in him decades before. Mood, tone, and thematic resonance throughout the film remain intimate, urgent, and emotionally layered. There's no glossing over the cost of Ray's success. The racism he faced, the women he hurt, the years he lost to addiction. But the film doesn't dwell in tragedy. It is ultimately a story of transcendence. How a man who couldn't see still managed to see what most of the world couldn't. The unifying, redemptive power of music. The score and sound design reinforce this. When Ray is in control, the music soars. When he is unraveling, the soundscape fractures, sometimes falling to silence, other times overwhelmed with dissonance. This auditory storytelling is crucial. We are not only watching Ray's life. We are hearing it, feeling it through sound, just as he did. The genius of Ray lies in its ability to transcend the boundaries of visual storytelling. Refusing to flatten its subject into a simple hero's journey, the film offers a kaleidoscopic, emotionally charged rendering of a life shaped as much by suffering as by song. The structure, performances, and mood all work together to create a portrait not of perfection but of perseverance. A man who turned his blindness into vision and his pain into beauty. The characters in Ray don't exist merely to orbit the gravitational pull of Ray Charles's fame. They breathe, ache, evolve, and fracture alongside him. The film is not a solo performance. It is a symphony of layered relationships, each revealing a different chord of Ray's identity. His past, his vulnerability, and his stubborn will to survive. The character arcs, especially Ray's, are intricately sculpted to reflect a man not simply shaped by genius but by guilt, memory, trauma, and resilience. Ray Charles's conflict within Jamie Foxx's portrayal of Ray Charles is a study in internal contradictions. Ray is charismatic and emotionally distant, loyal and faithless, principled and deeply flawed. His arc doesn't follow a tidy line of redemption. It's a jagged path that mirrors real psychological growth. We don't see a man simply overcome blindness. We see someone use it as a tool to sharpen his other senses, musical, emotional, and psychological. At his core, Ray is not running from blindness but from shame and grief. The death of his younger brother George and the trauma of being unable to save him from a psychic wound that remains unhealed for most of the film drive Ray's perfectionism, emotional detachment, and even his drug use. The heroin doesn't numb his body. It anesthetizes the memory. This internal conflict is brought to life through his relationships with his mother, his wife, his lovers, his bandmates. He resists intimacy even as he craves it. He controls everything in his career but loses control over his personal life. His transformation is slow, and it's not about becoming a better musician. It's about becoming a man capable of facing. This arc finds resolution not in applause or accolades but in a private moment. The hallucination turns into a reckoning with his past during rehab. There, he doesn't recover in the cinematic sense. He simply accepts that acceptance is what finally allows Ray to make honest choices, like refusing to play for segregated audiences in Georgia. It's not a transformation that's loud. It's quiet, hard, and rooted in emotional clarity. Arthur Robinson, Ray's mother, the unseen spine, though she appears only in flashbacks, played with powerful restraint by Sharon Warren. Her character casts one of the longest shadows in the film. Her character doesn't change, but she doesn't need to. She represents a fixed point in Ray's chaotic world. Her teachings, especially her refusal to coddle Ree after he loses his sight, plant the seed for his independence. What makes her character compelling is how the film allows us to feel her impact without over-explaining it. Every flashback to her presence is rooted in a moment of challenge in Ray's adult life. She becomes a kind of internal voice, moral, firm, and loving but unyielding. She teaches him not only how to survive but how to endure even in her absence. She functions as a moral compass and the source of his deepest strength. Della B. Robinson, the moral center Kerry Washington's Del Abe, is far more than a patient, long-suffering wife. She is the emotional conscience of the film. Through her eyes, we witness both the brilliance and the self-destruction of Ray. Her love for him is grounded, not idealized. She challenges him not by demanding change but by withholding indulgence. She doesn't fight for Ray's career. She fights for Ray, the man, the husband, the father, the soul beneath the fame. Her arc is defined not by transformation but by accumulated resilience over the course of the film. We watch her weigh loyalty against self-respect, love against survival. Her decision to stay and later to draw a line gives the film some of its most emotionally honest moments when she refuses to allow their home to be a haven for addiction, not out of bitterness, but out of hope that the man she married, Ray, is still buried beneath the celebrity and the habit. Margie Hendris, portrayed by Regina King in the film Broken Mirror, brings explosive intensity to Margie Hendris, one of Ray's most complicated relationships. Margie is not just a backup singer or a mistress. She's a mirror to Ray's own internal chaos. Her passion, defiance, and tragic unraveling reflect everything Ray both wants and fears. Margie calls out his hypocrisy, addictions, and cowardice in ways no one else dares. But she's not simply a narrative device. She's layered in her own right, a woman who yearns to be seen not just professionally but personally. Her slow descent into alcoholism and despair is not just tragic. It's a critique of Ray's emotional limits. Her death is understated, but its impact is shattering. In losing Margie, Ray loses one of the few people who saw him without illusion. Jeff Brown, the loyal bridge, is Clifton Powell's Jeff Brown. Ray's longtime manager, Jeff, is the bridge between the raw, instinctive Ray and the polished public figure he becomes. Jeff doesn't change dramatically, but his unwavering loyalty, frustration with Ray's demons, and quiet support build a relationship based on mutual necessity and buried affection. Their arc is less about dramatic rupture and more about accumulating strain. It's a business relationship that survives the weight of fame, betrayal, and addiction, because both men understand each other in a way others don't. Atit Erdogan and the industry men are catalysts and constraints. Aimed Erdogan, along with other executives at Atlantic and later ABC Records, are less developed as characters in the emotional sense, but they serve a crucial role in contextualizing Ray's battles within the music industry. Erdogan, in particular, respects Ray's artistry and offers him the creative freedom and ownership that ultimately shape Ray's legacy. Their relationship is transactional but deeply respectful, another layer to Ray's arc. Autonomy and control clash as the film builds to its climax. The strength of the characters lies not only in their individual qualities, but also in how their conflicts, desires, and loyalties shape Ray's trajectory. These aren't one-dimensional relationships. They evolve, rupture, heal, or sometimes simply drift away. The tension between Ray and his past is mirrored by the tension between Ray and the people who try to love him despite himself. Each relationship forces Ray to confront something his mother urges him to stand on his own. Adela challenges him to be emotionally present, and Margie reflects the costs of his moral failure. Jeff tests his loyalty, and Attitude represents artistic trust. These aren't side characters. They are narrative instruments, each contributing to the fuller sound of Ray's internal symphony. The mood of Ray is shaped as much by these layered relationships as it is by the music. There is sorrow in every high note, love behind every confrontation, and history in every silence between characters. In a film about a man who couldn't see, Ray never fails to reveal the full, complicated truth of human connection. The performances aren't simply vehicles for storytelling. They are the lifeblood of the film, the emotional current that flows through every frame, every silence, every burst of music. What makes this biopic feel less like a reenactment and more like a resurrection is the remarkable depth and emotional authenticity the cast brings to their roles. These aren't actors playing characters. They are artists channeling entire lives. Jamie Foxx as Ray Charles is a performance of possession, not imitation. Jamie Foxx doesn't play Ray Charles. He disappears into him. This isn't a matter of mimicry, though Foxx captures every nuance. The gait, the sway, the smile that hides more than it reveals. But it's in the emotional depth behind the eyes that the real alchemy happens. Foxx taps into Ray's contradictions, the playful charisma and the guarded sorrow, the musical genius and the personal failings, the charm that fills stadiums and the silence that isolates him doesn't come through overt displays of emotion. Instead, he achieves it through an incredible physical and emotional control. Watch the way his fingers dance across the keys, not just hitting the notes, but feeling their history. Observe how his face tightens in a quiet scene with Delaby, or how his body tenses when a memory of his brother George interrupts his reality. The pain is never announced, but it's always present, coiled beneath the surface. Then there's his voice, not just in the singing, which is lip-sync to Ray Charles's actual vocals, but in the way he speaks. Foxx captures the cadence, the rhythm, the musicality of Ray's speech, making even casual conversations feel like they belong to a man who thinks in sound. It's no wonder this performance earned him the Academy Award. It's not a performance that asks for praise. It demands belief. Regina King as Margie Hendris is a storm in a silk dress. She brings a fire to Margie Hendris that makes her not just a supporting character, but an emotional catalyst. Margie isn't written as a victim, and King never plays her that way. She's ferocious, funny, sensual, and wounded, often all at once. Her scenes with Ree crackle with tension, not just sexual tension, but existential tension. She challenges him in ways no one else does. And King's performance makes us feel that challenge in our bones. Her voice is powerful, but it's her eyes that do the most damage. There's a constant flicker of love, resentment, desperation. Her arc from magnetic stage presence to emotional breakdown is as compelling as Ray's. When Margie disappears from the narrative, her absence hurts not just because of what she meant to Ray, but because of how fully King made her matter. Kerry Washington as Delaby Robinson is the graceful anchor. Her portrayal of Delab is quiet, deliberate, and utterly essential. Where Margie is fire, Della is steel, wrapped in velvet. Washington doesn't go for big dramatic moments. She builds a character from subtle gestures, the way she looks at Ree when he's lying, the way her voice. When she's disappointed, Ray drops her head, but she still holds on to hope. This is evident in her refusal to become invisible, even as Ray tries to shut her out. Washington's strength lies in her ability to hold space for contradiction. She loves Ray but doesn't romanticize him. She forgives him but doesn't excuse him. Despite the emotional weight of a marriage slowly eroded by addiction and ego, she never seems to be playing a long-suffering trope. When Della is in Washington's hands, she becomes the film's moral and emotional axis. Sharon Warren's performance as Arthur Robinson is etched in fire. Her screen time is limited, but her impact is seismic. As Ray's mother, Arthur Robinson commands every frame with a presence that is both nurturing and formidable. Her performance is stripped of sentimentality. She teaches Ree to survive not with lovesick devotion but with gritty, uncompromising strength. One of the most haunting and defining scenes in the film is young Ree stumbling through their home after losing his sight. Arthur refuses to help him. Tears well in her eyes, but she stays back. Her posture is frozen in steely heartbreak. It's a masterclass in parental love forged in survival. Her line, "Don't let nobody turn you into no cripple," echoes throughout Ray's life, and Warren makes us believe that every ounce of that strength came from lived experience. It's a raw, unforgettable performance. Curtis Armstrong as Atit Erdogan, the quiet ally, is less flamboyant than many music executives in film, and that's exactly what makes him believable. Armstrong plays Erdogan as a man who recognizes genius and knows better than to interfere with it. He gives Ree space, freedom, and most importantly, respect. The performance is subtle but crucial. Armstrong doesn't push Erdogan into emotional territory. Instead, he makes him a kind of quiet protector. He's the first industry figure who treats Ree not as a product but as a partner. His chemistry with Foxx's Ree is built on mutual recognition. The scene between them highlights the unspoken understanding that this is someone who sees Ree for who he truly is, not just for what he can do. Harry Lennox as Joe Adams delivers a polished yet piercing performance. Lennox portrays Joe Adams, Ray's slick and business-savvy manager, with a chilling composure. He is always impeccably dressed, perfectly poised, and quietly menacing. Lennox brings an unsettling calm to the role, suggesting a man whose loyalty is measured in percentages rather than principles. He doesn't need to shout or scheme. His power lies in suggestion and the way he strategically isolates Ray from her old allies. Lennox's performance captures the subtle betrayal of corporate professionalism, the kind that smiles while tightening the leash. Joe's presence in Ray's life becomes a symbol of the cost of control. Lennox nails the character's quiet manipulation without ever tipping into caricature. Denise Dowse as Marlene provides a warm and sane presence, a grounded kindness that offsets the chaos of Ray's life. While not central to the plot, Marlene adds a necessary dimension. Not everyone in Ray's world is transactional or romantic. Some are simply decent. Dowse plays her with a calm energy, a woman who exists outside the cycles of addiction and fame, providing brief refuge in a storm of instability. Richard Schiff as Jerry Wexler brings the nervous energy of a man who knows he's working with fire to the role of Jerry Wexler. He walks the line between corporate interest and genuine artistic respect. Schiff doesn't have many standout scenes, but he conveys a layered tension. He is in the business of music, but he knows music is not just business. His performance complements the ensemble, enriching the backdrop of Ray's world. Terren Howard as GSI McGee, the cautionary mirror, plays a smaller but potent role. He is the first musician we see Ree working with and the first whose path Ray outgrows. Howard plays Gossi with quiet charisma and a hint of resentment. He is a musician who knows his place in the world. Mirror of what Ray could have been if he had remained in the background when their paths diverged. It's a soft yet telling rupture. Howard delivers the performance with subtle disappointment, adding texture to Ray's early career. These performances don't just support Jamie Foxx. They build the world that shapes him. Every character feels lived in, and every relationship is charged with history. Whether it's a glance from Della, a scream from Margie, or a memory of Arthur, each moment pulses with the same theme. No one makes it alone, not even a genius. The cast doesn't orbit Ray Charles. They define him through them. We see the full measure of his brilliance and his brokenness. Taylor Hackford's direction in Ree is not merely functional. It's orchestral, just as Ray Charles turned blues into gospel and gospel into rhythm and soul. Hackford fuses biopic conventions with stylistic bravado and emotional subtlety. The result is not a documentary-style timeline of a famous life, but a cinematic composition full of rhythm, restraint, and rawness. Every directorial decision, from pacing to visual metaphor, serves a single resonant aim: to immerse the audience in Ray Charles's internal world, even as we watch his rise on the world stage. The tone and mood are dark, lit by sound from the very first frames. Hackford establishes a tonal duality that persists throughout the film: light versus darkness, both literally and emotionally. The movie lives in shadows. Nightclubs filled with cigarette smoke, hotel rooms where secrets fester, memories buried in dim-lit spaces of childhood trauma. The use of darkness isn't just aesthetic. It mirrors Ray's blindness, his emotional detachment, and the buried pain of his brother's death. But within this darkness, music is always a beacon. Hackford lets the sound lead us out of the visual silence. He doesn't just showcase Ray's music. He lets us feel how Ray hears it. Sound design becomes a psychological tool. We hear piano notes before we see fingers on the keys. We hear silence swell before a memory crashes in the auditory world. Becomes more vivid than the visual, a stylistic echo of Ray's lived reality. This approach shapes the film's mood: haunting, sensual, melancholic, and always pulsing with attention to what's said versus what's felt. The narrative rhythm, memory, and improvisation are all avoided by Hackford. Instead, he unfolds the story with a jazz-like spontaneity. Memories intrude mid-conversation, flashbacks bleed into the present, and the timeline is not linear but emotional. This nonlinear structure is not a gimmick. It mirrors Ray's own psychological fragmentation. The past doesn't stay in the past. It interrupts, invades, and destabilizes. The most critical of these memories is the drowning of Ray's brother George. Hackford returns to it repeatedly, each time peeling back more emotional layers. These flashbacks are not neutral. They're embodied. When Ray is high, the memories feel distorted and suffocating. When he's clean, they arrive with painful clarity. Hackford uses this technique to make trauma feel alive, not as exposition but as a recurring rhythm in Ray's psyche. Shot composition, seeing through sound, is one of the most evocative aspects of Hackford's direction. He uses the camera to suggest Ray's experience of the world. When Ray walks into a room, we often see close-ups of hands, feet, soundboards, instruments, rather than full establishing shots. The visual field is fragmented and tactile. There are moments where the camera pans slowly across textured surfaces, a piano key, a floorboard, a drop of water, to simulate Ray's heightened sensory perception. The audience isn't watching Ray interact with the world. We're feeling it with him. Another motif is the use of silhouettes and mirrors. Ray is often shown as a shadow in motion, a man half-lit, suggesting both his blindness and the emotional opacity he projects. Mirrors are used not for vanity but for disconnection. Hackford can't look at himself, and often neither can we. Doesn't just show Ray that he renders him unknowable, elusive, and layered, mirroring the real-life complexity of the man. The pacing crescendos and silences. The pacing of Ray is deliberate, shifting between the energy of performance and the stillness of personal reckoning. Hackford understands that a musical life isn't all rhythm and high notes. It's built on pauses, dropouts, and rests. Concert scenes are kinetic, cut with tight edits and rich sound, capturing the ecstasy of Ray's public persona. But private moments slow to almost unbearable stillness. Rehab scenes, arguments with Della, moments of grief. They linger. Hackford lets silence hang heavy, not just for drama, but for resonance. The film doesn't rush toward fame. Hackford is patient, allowing us to see how loneliness, ambition, and addiction accumulate. We feel the weight of each choice. The pacing becomes a kind of emotional choreography, matching Ray's inner tempo. Sometimes it's manic with possibility, sometimes dragged down by guilt. Stylization. Music as language, not decoration. Hackford's greatest stylistic achievement may be how he integrates music not as an accessory, but as narrative dialogue. He doesn't cut away to performances as breaks from the story. The music is the story. When Ray performs Georgia on My Mind, it's not a musical interlude. It's an emotional confession. When he sings with Margie, the camera lingers on their chemistry, their shared defiance, and their inevitable fracture. The editing in these scenes is fluid, rhythmic, and intimate, letting us feel the stakes behind the sound. Even the score is treated like a second script. Music cues don't just reflect emotion. They advance character arcs, underline tension, or offer subtext. For instance, when Ree experiments in the studio, the camera circles him slowly, and the sound of new musical ideas seems to rise not just from instruments, but from within him. These are not just scenes of creativity, they are scenes of self-discovery. Directing the ensemble, emotional precision, Hackford's control over tone. Every performance from Jamie Foxx to the smallest supporting role feels tuned to the same emotional frequency. There are no false notes, no characters played too big or too small. Hackford creates a space where emotion is allowed to build naturally, where even confrontation is earned. He lets actors sit in a moment. Pauses are not feared, but embraced. This patience allows the emotional weight of each scene to land fully without melodrama. He also resists sanitizing the complexity of his subject. Ray is not softened for sympathy. Hackford doesn't flinch from his failings, including drug use and infidelity, but he also doesn't sensationalize them. The tone remains one of emotional honesty, not judgment. In this way, Hackford treats the audience not as spectators of a legend but as confidants to a flawed, brilliant man. Visual metaphors and recurring imagery build emotional architecture. Hackford uses recurring images, such as water, footsteps, and outstretched hands, to weave a kind of emotional architecture. Water, in particular, becomes a haunting symbol of memory and loss. Every return to the image of George drowning is not just a flashback. It's a confrontation when Ree finally faces that memory in rehab. Hackford floods the screen with light for the first time, a visual contrast to the rest of the film. It's not just illumination. It's emotional release, a long-denied reckoning. Another subtle device is the use of stage lighting. Ray is always surrounded by brightness, even as the rest of his world remains in shadow. Hackford uses this contrast to suggest the paradox of Ray's life. His public brilliance and private blindness, both literal and emotional. Taylor Hackford doesn't just direct Ray. He composes it. Every shot, every beat, every silence plays a role in evoking a life-lived intention. Between light and dark, sound and silence, genius and damage, his vision is immersive, his style purposeful, and his storytelling deeply human. The result is not just a biography of Ray Charles. It's a cinematic translation of his soul. In Ree, the cinematography doesn't just capture the story. It feels it. Cinematographer Powell Edelman crafts a visual language that resonates with the emotional and psychological terrain of Ray Charles's life. It's a world filtered through blindness, memory, music, and trauma. Rather than compensate for Ray's inability to see, the camera becomes an extension of how he experiences the world through sound, sensation, intuition, and emotional memory. Camera angles, lighting, and framing are not merely stylistic elements. They are deeply thematic. They create a narrative that unfolds not only on screen but also beneath the surface in the spaces between what Ree sees and what we see. Camera angles, reframing power, and vulnerability are all used throughout the film. Edelman uses camera angles to communicate Ray's shifting sense of agency in performance scenes. The camera often frames Ree from low angles, looking up at him as he commands the stage. In these moments, his blindness disappears, and he is not defined by limitation but by presence. The angle conveys, this is a man in control, a creator, a master of the moment. However, in private, intimate scenes, especially when Ray is vulnerable or in emotional conflict, the camera dips or pulls back. Sometimes it observes from corners or doorways, creating a sense of isolation. When Ray is deep in addiction, the angles become more askew. There's a restlessness to the movement, suggesting that even the camera is unsure of where to land. One haunting example is the scene in the hotel bathroom where Ree collapses under the weight of heroin withdrawal. The camera hovers from above, looking down not with judgment but with tragic distance. It's a bird's-eye view that says, "He is alone now, even from himself." Lighting, darkness, and identity are all used as emotional and psychological metaphors in Ray. Ray Charles lived in literal darkness, and Edelman never lets us forget that. Instead of using shadow as absence, he uses it as texture. The darkness is rich, layered, and full of suggestion. In many interior scenes, especially in Ray's personal spaces, the lighting is low, sometimes barely present. Faces flicker in lamplight, and figures blur into the background. It's not about realism. It's about evoking the inner world of a man who sees with his ears, his hands, and his memory. This aesthetic choice invites the audience to lean in and experience the world the way Ree does through fragmented perspectives. Impressions rather than visual clarity. Light, when it comes, is rarely soft. It often appears as a blinding, overexposed glare, particularly in flashbacks to Ray's childhood. The brightness of these memories contrasts harshly with the surrounding darkness, reinforcing how much emotional weight those moments carry. In the climactic rehab sequence, when Ray finally confronts the trauma of his brother's death, the scene is flooded with an unnatural white light. It's not healing light. It's interrogative, almost surgical. The effect is jarring and surreal, fitting for a psychological exorcism. Stage lighting transforms spotlights, isolating Ray in golden warmth. These beams don't just illuminate him, they exalt him. In performances, he is not blind. He is transcendent. Light becomes a symbol of his genius, cutting through personal darkness and framing a study in emotional proximity. Edelman's framing choices throughout mirror the emotional push and pull between intimacy and alienation. Often, Ray is framed alone, even in crowded rooms. This is particularly evident in scenes involving Margie Hendris or Della B. Even when physically close, the framing holds Ray slightly apart. He is a man both touched and untouchable, emotionally compartmentalized, watching his own life from behind a curtain of pain and pride. Conversely, the camera draws in close during moments of musical creation. When Ray is experimenting in the studio, composing at the piano, or improvising with his band, the framing tightens. We see close-ups of his fingers, his face, the creases in his forehead, the tension in his lips. It's as if the camera is trying to listen with him, to get inside the music. These tight frames create a claustrophobic intimacy, but not in a way that stifles. Instead, they immerse. A striking example is the scene where Ray invents his signature fusion of gospel and R&B. The camera circles him slowly, capturing the reactions of the other musicians in brief glances. It's as though the frame is moving to the rhythm of inspiration. Framing becomes kinetic, almost musical in its own right. Visually striking moments include memory trauma and water. There are sequences in Ray where the visual language becomes downright poetic. None more so than those involving Ray's memories of his brother, George. These flashbacks are hazy and washed in amber light, often slow motion and often silent. The drowning scene itself is one of the most visually stunning and emotionally devastating moments in the show. The camera lingers just a moment too long as young George slips beneath the water, the surface catching light in a shimmering, surreal way. Water is used not just as a memory but as a visual motif of guilt, Ray's blindness, which seems to have been born not just from disease but from this unresolved trauma. Later in the film, a dreamlike sequence shows Ray submerged in water, surrounded by voices and light. The cinematography here becomes abstract, more impressionistic than narrative, as if reality itself has been drowned by memory, atmosphere, and tension. The club is portrayed as a church, the studio as a battlefield, and the nightclub scenes in Ray are perhaps the most atmospheric, dripping with sensual tension and electricity. Edelman uses smoke, shallow focus, and dynamic lighting to create an almost mythic space. These arenas of transformation where reasserts his genius and seduces his audience. The camera moves like a dancer, fluid, seductive, and unpredictable, in contrast to the recording studios where creative conflicts unfold. These rooms are lit starkly and shot with more rigid framing, more sterile, filled with quiet tension. The camera often holds Ree in profile, emphasizing both his concentration and his stubbornness. The contrast between the club and the studio reflects the duality of Ray's life. Freedom versus structure, improvisation versus control. Ray is a film built not only on sound but on sight, a paradoxical yet intentional choice by Edelman. Cinematography brings us closer to the truth of a man who couldn't see but saw more than most. Every shadow, every beam of light, every movement of the lens telling us something more than the dialogue can. This is cinematography that doesn't just observe. It interprets, translates, gives blindness a voice, and memory a frame. The editing in Ray, led by editor Paul Hearst, serves as the hidden heartbeat of the film. A steady, intuitive rhythm that pulses with the emotional logic of Ray Charles's journey. Rather than strict chronological order, it doesn't just cut from scene to scene. It flows like a soulful composition. Every transition, every juxtaposition feels felt rather than calculated. Hirsch understands that this is not a story told in straight lines. It's a story told in echoes, in stutters, in reprises. The editing mirrors Ray's music, improvisational yet deeply purposeful. Memory as rhythm, nonlinear storytelling that breathes at the core of Ray's editing. The structure is a beautifully realized nonlinear rhythm. The film doesn't move from birth to death in a traditional biopic format. Instead, it moves like memory, constantly shifting between Ray's present and his emotionally charged past. These shifts aren't abrupt. They blend seamlessly, like a note fading before the next begins. This organic emotional coherence gives the film a feel of reminiscence, less like storytelling and more like remembering flashbacks. Flashbacks are often triggered not by events but by internal states. A confrontation, a sound, a moment of solitude. These transitions aren't telegraphed by the editing. It trusts the audience to feel them, and that trust creates a powerful intimacy. We're not observing Ray's life from the outside. We're inside his mind, walking the corridors of his memory. One striking example of this rhythm comes when Ray, in the depths of his heroin addiction, is left alone in a hotel room. The silence, isolation, and barely perceptible sound of dripping water are abruptly interrupted by the sudden return to the moment his younger brother drowned. These transitions are seamless, not through flashy effects but through emotional continuity. The pain in the present is braided into the trauma of the past. Montage and momentum drive the film, despite its emotionally introspective tone. Ree never drags much of this. It's due to the editor's ability to modulate pacing through montage. When Ray is on the rise, touring, recording, building his band, the film accelerates. Sequences become brisk, punchy, filled with purposeful motion. These montages are cut with a syncopated energy that mirrors the rhythms of Ray's music. Quick cuts of buses rolling down highways, stage lights blinking on microphones being lowered, records spinning. These aren't just success montages. They're immersions into the lifestyle and momentum of fame. Even within these energetic passages, the film remains character-driven. The editing allows room for nuance, a long pause before a decision, a slow close-up of Ray registering the weight of a moment. Hearst doesn't sacrifice depth for speed. The flow isn't about efficiency. It's about pulse. Emotional crescendos, silence, and the rhythmic pulse of Ray's music. These elements create a cohesive and immersive cinematic experience. The film's most masterful use of rhythm lies in its manipulation of silence. Silence becomes a distinct element, akin to Ray Charles's revolutionary approach to music by dropping beats or prolonging notes. The editors of Ray employ restraint to build tension and emotional resonance. Consider the detox sequence. The pacing slows dramatically, cuts are stretched, shots linger on Ray's convulsing body, and the soundtrack fades to a nearly inaudible hum. The rhythm here isn't fast or slow. It's agonizing, forcing the audience to sit in discomfort, just as Ray must. When we finally transition into the hallucinatory dream sequence of Ray confronting his younger self, the shift is so fluid it feels inevitable. There's no need for exposition or visual cues. The rhythm guides us there. This kind of editorial timing is rare. treating the audience not as passive viewers but as participants in Ray's inner journey. Scene construction employs contrast and counterpoint throughout. Joyful performance scenes are often followed by private moments of collapse, and triumphant new recordings are juxtaposed with Ray's declining relationship with Margie or his deepening drug habit. These contrasts aren't jarring. They're emotionally strategic. For instance, after an electrifying concert performance, we might see Ray alone removing his sunglasses, collapsing into silence. These cuts aren't about plot. They're about emotional rhythm. Hirsch constructs scenes like a call and response, each high note followed by a shadow, each success tempered by personal cost. This structure deepens the film's mood, transforming it from a story of fame into a reflection of the duality between persona and self. Editing syncs with soundtrack, one of the film's most electrifying aspects. Musical numbers aren't shot as static elements. They're integrated into the emotional architecture of the film. Performances are cut with dynamic timing, rising and falling in sync with Ray's phrasing. Hirsch edits these sequences with a feel for musicality, letting the beat guide the visual flow in the sequence where Ray invents his gospel blues fusion. The rhythm of the editing mirrors the rising momentum of discovery, each cut landing like a note, the twitch of a bandmate's eyebrow, a hand clapping on the beat, Ray's face tightening with intensity. This synchronization between image and sound creates a visceral connection between the audience and the creative process. We're not just hearing the music. We're inside its birth time and trauma, repetition as emotional return. The film is unafraid to return to certain moments, especially Ray's brother's drowning. These repetitions are not redundant. They are emotionally cumulative. Each time we revisit the moment, the edit changes slightly, we see a new detail, hear a new sound, feel a deeper ache. The rhythm of these returns mimics the nature of trauma, how certain memories resurface over and over, refusing to resolve. Eventually, when Ray finally processes this trauma during withdrawal, the scene is edited like a release. The memory unfolds in full, uninterrupted, almost dreamlike. The tension that's been simmering beneath the surface for 2 hours finally finds its outlet. Editing here isn't fast or flashy. It's patient, trusting the moment, letting it breathe. Ray is not a film that moves at a uniform pace. Instead, it swells and contracts like lungs, pulling in breath. Paul Hirsch's editing doesn't aim for seamless invisibility. It embraces texture, weight, emotion. It's rhythmically alive, emotionally attuned, and narratively bold. The pacing bends to Ray's interior world, his triumphs, his addictions, his memories. This creates a flow that is less about chronology and more about truthful experience, like the music Ray Charles gave the world. The film's rhythm lingers long after the last note fades in. Music is not just a feature. It's the film's lifeblood, its narrator, and its emotional spine, pulses through every frame. The film uses Ray Charles's original recordings, his voice, his piano, and his sound to create an immersive experience that is at once cinematic and visceral. There is no disconnect between the man and the music. The score, the performances, and the ambient sound design are all intricately woven into the fabric of the film's storytelling. With such nuance, even silence carries a melody of its own. Music is portrayed as a character, not just a background element, from the opening frame. The film lets us know that the music is not ornamental. It is integral, a way for Ray Charles to express himself, remember, heal, perform, and escape. The film treats his music deeply personally, not just historically. Every song is contextually placed, echoing the emotions of a scene or even reframing them. Music reveals what Ray can't say out loud. It is his first language. When Ray hits the stage for the first time, the music becomes a declaration. This is who I am. This pattern continues. Songs are not inserted for nostalgia or flair. They emerge from conflict, joy, desire, defiance, and pain. The film doesn't merely showcase hits like, "What Did I Say?", "Georgia on My Mind", or "I Got a Woman". Instead, it builds them, allowing us to live inside the making of those songs structurally and emotionally. So, when the music swells, it's not an external cue. It's an emotional release. Standout sequences and sonic pivots make the film truly memorable. One of the most electric moments is the birth of What Did I Say? It begins as a spontaneous stage improvisation and becomes a watershed moment. The editing, the band's growing intensity, and Jamie Foxx's performance all climax in the infectious call and response that pioneered. This is not just a concert. It's a revolution happening in real time. The film captures the rawness, danger, and ecstatic possibility of musical innovation. Then there's Georgia on My Mind, perhaps the film's most emotionally charged sequence. By the time it reaches this point, the audience is deeply invested in the story. Ray sings a song for the Georgia State Assembly, carrying the weight of homecoming forgiveness and personal reclamation. What might have once been just a melody becomes a spiritual act. The arrangement is full and lush, yet it doesn't drown the moment. Instead, it lifts it, elevating Ray's apology to something transcendent. The restraint in the orchestration, the slow build, and the deliberate tempo mirror Ray's own hesitation and vulnerability. This is not performance. This is confession. The use of silence, emotional and psychological precision just as crucial as the sound, is the absence of it. The film often pulls away from music in moments of crisis or reflection, when Ray experiences heroin withdrawal. The sudden hush is jarring. We've been living in a world filled with rhythm, melody, and movement, then stillness. The silence becomes oppressive, claustrophobic, mirroring his isolation, both physical and emotional. Similarly, in childhood flashbacks, especially during the traumatic scenes involving his brother's death, the sound often fades to a dull hum or a single ambient tone. No score, no underscoring cues, just memory, raw and untethered. These moments force the audience into Ray's sensory experience. We aren't told how to feel. We hear it by hearing nothing at all. Recurring motifs, gospel blues and the battle for the soul, thematically. The film uses gospel and blues as more than genres. They become symbols of Ray's internal struggle. Gospel represents his roots, his mother, his moral compass. Blues and later R&B represent his rebellion, his independence, and his sexuality. The music itself embodies this spiritual tension. In the early scenes, we hear Ray echoing the spirituals of his childhood, taught to him by his mother and the church. As he begins fusing gospel rhythms with secular lyrics, the film captures not just innovation but conflict. When Ray is challenged on the morality of his music, when he's accused of stealing the Lord's music for sinful purposes, the soundtrack becomes a powerful force. Intensifies this collision. The layering of sacred harmony with suggestive rhythm is not accidental. It's a mirror of Ray's identity crisis. The music becomes a theological battleground, and the film allows us to feel that contradiction, not solve it. Sound design and spatial acoustics create a unique listening experience, akin to hearing as Ray Charles did in key scenes. The film isolates certain sounds, such as the tapping of a cane, the shuffle of feet, and the rustle of a dress, narrowing the focus like a spotlight in a dark room. In contrast, in other scenes, ambient sounds flood in suddenly, creating a sensory overload, like the worst of a record player. These choices don't just serve realism. They draw us into Ray's perception. When Ray is composing or lost in thought, the film uses subtle piano motifs, improvisational searching, and unfinished tracks to track his emotional state. These musical threads often reappear, reshaped or completed later in the film, serving as a kind of sonic foreshadowing and an oral echo that pays off emotionally. The brilliance of the music in Ray lies in its seamless integration with both diegetic and non-diegetic sound. Jamie Foxx may be lip-syncing to Ray Charles's original vocals, but the illusion is flawless due to the attention to how those performances are staged, mic'd, edited, and scored. The boundary between performance and inner world blurs completely, never jarring us out of the story with a jarring cue or overbearing orchestration. The original score, composed by Craig Armstrong, is used sparingly but effectively. Armstrong's work supports Ray's emotional journey without stepping on it. His compositions are moody, restrained, and allegorical, often built around piano motifs that echo Ray's own style but never imitate it. The score understands that this is Ray's world and serves that world rather than competing with it. In Re, music isn't just wallpaper. It's a language, a legacy, a reflection of pain and ecstasy. It embodies faith and sin, memory and invention. The film doesn't merely showcase Ray Charles's catalog. It translates his soul into sound and silence, capturing groove and rupture, harmony and dissonance. Every note is felt, every silence matters. This is storytelling not told in words or images, but in sound that sings, aches, and survives. Ray is not merely a celebration of a musical genius. It's a deeply textured, emotionally resonant exploration of struggle, identity trauma, and transcendence. Woven beneath the beat of every song and the glow of every spotlight are questions about how we carry pain, how we reclaim dignity, and what it costs to create art from suffering. The film operates on a human scale, using Ray Charles's specific life to tap into universal truths about survival, blindness, literal and metaphorical, and the fragmented nature of memory. It sings, but it also asks questions that linger long after the final note fades. Blindness as a metaphor, seeing beyond sight. The most immediate theme the film wrestles with is blindness, but it refuses to treat it as a handicap or simple adversity to overcome. Instead, Ray makes blindness a metaphor for perception, for the ways people choose what to see and what to deny. Ray loses his sight as a child, but throughout the film, it becomes clear that he gains other forms of vision: sharper intuition, sonic sensitivity, and emotional perception. What he can't see with his eyes, he often sees with unnerving clarity through sound and instinct. Blindness also serves as a shield, a tool he uses to control his environment, to block out emotional truths. His grief over his brother's death, his guilt, his inability to confront his addictions. The film explores how trauma can render someone emotionally blind, even as they move through the world with confidence and charisma. His blindness is never romanticized, but it's never reduced either. It's not a disability as much as a condition through which his reality is shaped, layered with complexity and contradiction. Trauma and guilt, the past as a haunting chorus. One of the film's most haunting themes is the inescapability of childhood trauma. Ray's brother drowns while Ray, only a few feet away, fails to save him. This moment, simple in its staging, profound in its aftermath, becomes a permanent shadow. The film doesn't resolve this trauma quickly. In fact, it repeats it, echoing it throughout Ray's life through fragmented flashbacks, moments of silence, and echoes of the past. Internal breakdowns, a trauma locked away for decades, slowly poison him from within. His heroin addiction, womanizing, and cold detachment all serve as possible extensions of unresolved guilt and pain. The film doesn't excuse him, but rather contextualizes him, arguing that healing doesn't come from fame, genius, or fortune, but from confronting oneself and one's past. In a deeply symbolic moment, during Ray's withdrawal, he finally confronts the younger version of himself in a dreamlike hallucination. This is no easy psychological catharsis. It's earned, the emotional climax of the entire film. By acknowledging his guilt and facing his brother and mother in this interior landscape, Ray reclaims a piece of himself that had been buried under years of noise and denial. Ray's extraordinary talent is never in question, but the film complicates the myth of the tortured genius. It doesn't glamorize his pain or frame his addiction as some romantic affliction tied to creativity. Instead, it dissects the idea of genius as both a gift and a burden. We watch Ray innovate, create, and inspire, but we also witness him sabotage, manipulate, and alienate. The film repeatedly poses a subtle, disturbing question. What does it cost to make something beautiful, and who pays that price? Sometimes it's Ray, sometimes it's the women he loves, sometimes it's his bandmates or friends, and sometimes it's the boy who lost his brother in a backyard. Genius is never presented as salvation. It's a survival mechanism, yes, but also a prison. There's also a sharp awareness of how Black artists, particularly in the mid-20th century, were expected to be exceptional just to be seen. This pressure distorted personal freedom. Ray's rise in a racially divided America adds another dimension to this theme. His insistence on artistic control and owning his masters is not just business. It's a political act, a declaration of agency. Motherhood, memory, and moral backbone are also important elements. Ray's mother, Arthur Robinson, is more than a background character. She's the spiritual backbone of the film. Her presence lingers in Ray's psyche, guiding him, judging him, and ultimately saving him. Her tough love is not sentimental. It's survivalist. When she refuses to help him after he first goes blind, insisting he figure it out, it feels harsh, but the film repositions this as a moment of empowerment. She gives him his independence, not in spite of his blindness, but because of it. Her memory haunts him more than his brothers. She's the one who truly saved him. Ray embodies moral clarity, the ability to say no and stand up straight. However, he loses sight of this until he hits rock bottom in his hallucination. It's not a dealer, a woman, or a critic who challenges him. It's his mother reminding him of his former self. This relationship becomes a powerful theme, exploring the inner voice of conscience and how it can be muted by pain, ego, and addiction, but never completely silenced. Race, power, and cultural ownership are subtly woven throughout the narrative. Ray Charles rose during a time when black musicians were routinely exploited by white-owned record labels, underpaid, and robbed of creative control. The film doesn't shout these injustices. It shows them in boardrooms, backstage, contracts, and the quiet urgency of Ray's business negotiations. Ray's demand to own his masters is radical not just because of its rarity but because of what it represents: ownership of identity. He will not be packaged, repurposed, or silenced. This assertion of power aligns with his refusal to play segregated venues in the South. These moments feel understated but seismic. They show a man not only aware of his artistic voice but also of his social weight. Ray Charles is not just surviving America's racial landscape. He's challenging it, one contract, one concert, one note at a time. Music becomes a redemptive force above all else in Ray. It's not a cheap feel-good way. It's a complicated, often painful road to truth. Music is where Ray loses himself and where he finds himself again. It's the only space where he is fully himself, unblind, unashamed, and unapologetically real. The film respects this and allows his music to rise up in key emotional moments, not as ornamentation but as testimony. Songs are more than performances. They're emotional documents shaped by everything he's lived through. When Ray plays Hallelujah, it's flirtation and charm. When he sings Drown in My Own Tears, it's confession. When he closes with Georgia on My Mind, it's a profound expression of love. Atonement, the film positions each song as a kind of reckoning. This is who I was then, this is who I am now, this is who I wish I could be. The themes are not wrapped up in tidy resolutions. They are lived in, jagged, unfinished, just like the man himself. The film doesn't preach. It listens, remembers, and through that remembering, it heals slowly, honestly, with rhythm and soul. In Ray, the visual effects work quietly, almost invisibly, serving the story rather than calling attention to themselves. The film's world is rooted firmly in the mid-century America, a tactile, gritty, lived-in place. The textures of smoke-filled clubs, dusty sidewalks, and cramped recording studios create a palpable sense of place. The visual effects don't interrupt that world. Instead, they carefully enhance it, adding layers of authenticity and atmosphere without ever feeling artificial or intrusive. Practical effects and period detail most of the film's visual immersion relies on. From the vintage cars and clothing to the neon signage and interiors, the physical environment is crafted with painstaking detail. These practical elements ground the film in reality, making every frame feel lived in and believable. When Ray walks through a bustling 1950s street or performs on a smoky stage, it's not a set piece. It's a slice of life. This tactile approach extends to the physicality of scenes involving Ray's blindness and childhood trauma. For example, the floodwaters surrounding young Ray's brother's drowning feel immediate and threatening, achieved through carefully controlled water effects and location shooting rather than digital trickery. This realism intensifies the emotional impact of those formative moments. Digital effects, subtle and seamless, appear where they do. They are understated and integrated with a light touch. The film employs them primarily for period-appropriate augmentations, such as extending backgrounds to recreate historical cityscapes, removing modern elements from shots, or subtly enhancing crowd scenes. These effects support immersion by ensuring that nothing jarringly out of place distracts from the story. One notable use of digital effects involves the depiction of Ray's vision loss and hallucinations. The film occasionally shifts perspective to approximate how Ree might see the world after blindness, using blurred edges, distortions, or softened focus. These effects are restrained and tasteful, designed to evoke a sensory experience rather than serve as flashy. Visual spectacles are not the focus of this digital work. Instead, they enhance the audience's emotional connection to the film. The filmmakers blend old and new film stock and color grade the images to create a seamless transition between eras. They also employ color grading and texture effects to evoke the feel of the 1950s through 1970s, using a slightly muted palette that enhances the nostalgic tone without feeling artificial. The graininess and warmth of the images suggest film stock from the period, adding to the movie's organic texture. These subtle effects are integral to the film's mood, blending practical cinematography with post-production artistry as emotional tools rather than spectacle. For instance, during moments of Ray's drug withdrawal or hallucinations, visual distortions and layering of images create a dreamlike disorientation that mirrors his mental state. This use of effects is integrated into the film's mood, inviting the audience inside Ray's fractured experience rather than simply showing a surface-level drug scene. Practical over digital maintains tangibility throughout the film, as practical effects are favored because they maintain a sense of tangibility, crucial to the story's grounded tone. The tactile reality of Ray's world, the feeling of a piano key under his fingers, the warmth of stage lights, and the texture of his surroundings are preserved. This choice respects the film's focus on human experience rather than spectacle. When digital effects do come into play, they are carefully calibrated not to disrupt the texture but instead quietly reinforce the environment or internal states without pulling the viewer out of the moment. They serve immersion, not undermine it. In Ray's visual effects, an invisible hand guides, shapes, and deepens the viewer's experience without ever shouting for attention. The balance between practical and digital effects mirrors the film's broader aesthetic. A story about a real man living real struggles brought to life with authenticity, care, and just enough artistry to evoke wonder without artifice. Ray unfolds in a world that feels lived in, textured, and intensely real. Every setting, prop, and detail works in harmony to transport the audience deep into mid-century America, seen through the prism of Ray Charles's life and music. The production design doesn't just dress the film. It breathes history, mood, and meaning into every frame, crafting environments that are both visually compelling and imbued with a sense of the past. Emotionally resonant, The Power of Place follows Ray's journey from the dusty segregated streets of Albany, Georgia, where he grows up, to the smoky nightclubs and recording studios of the music industry. These settings vividly embody the social and cultural landscape of the era, creating a palpable contrast between the small-town simplicity, tinged with hardship, and the vibrant yet cutthroat glamour of show business. The production design uses these places to reflect Ray's internal struggles and growth. His childhood home feels cramped, raw, and fraught with emotional tension. A place where love is tough but unyielding, and where tragedy leaves invisible scars. The peeling paint, creaky wooden floors, and period-accurate furniture immerse us in his upbringing without nostalgia, highlighting the poverty and limitations that shaped his early life. On the other hand, the clubs and studio spaces of transformation are some of the film's most visually arresting locations. They pulse with energy and danger, where Ray is both king and prisoner. The dimly lit clubs packed with eager audiences and thick with cigarette smoke become crucibles for his genius, but they are also sites of personal struggle and conflict. The production design here is deeply layered. The gleam of a polished piano, the cluttered control panels of a recording booth, the gleaming microphones, and vintage amplifiers all evoke the physicality of music making in the 1950s and 60s. These spaces are almost characters themselves, intimate, demanding, and unpredictable. They are where Ray's talent comes alive, but they are also where the pressures and compromises of fame are most sharply felt. Props serve as extensions of character in The Power of Place. In Ray's case, they go beyond mere authenticity. His piano is not just an instrument. It's a lifeline, a source of solace, rebellion, and identity. The way he touches the keys, the worn spots on the pedals, and the subtle shifts in how the piano is framed all communicate his evolving relationship with music. Props like Ray's sunglasses, his tailored suits, the cigarettes he constantly lights and discards, and the visual shorthand they offer for his persona, defenses, and vulnerabilities create a compelling narrative. The sunglasses, in particular, become a kind of armor, both hiding his eyes and symbolizing the complex interplay between what he shows the world and what he keeps private. The production team's commitment to historical accuracy deepens the film's immersive quality. Cars, signage, newspapers, radios, and household objects are meticulously chosen to match the time and place, creating a seamless tapestry of mid-century America. This attention to detail anchors the story in a specific cultural moment, lending weight and realism to Ray's personal journey. Locations serve as emotional landscapes that mirror Ray's highs and lows. The transition from the cramped South to sprawling urban hubs marks his passage from boyhood to the complexity of adult life and fame. Scenes set in hotel rooms, on tour buses, or backstage reveal isolation amid success, a stark contrast to the communal spaces of his childhood. Some scenes use location lighting and design to amplify mood. The warm glow of a jazz club lamp, the harsh fluorescent glare of a hospital room, and the muted tones of a prison cell, each setting enrich the film's emotional texture, drawing viewers not just into Ray's world, but into the feelings that world evokes. The production design is a masterclass in storytelling through space and detail. Every location and prop is carefully chosen and layered with meaning, creating a world that feels authentic, charged with history, and alive with the emotional currents of Ray Charles's life. This visual richness not only grounds the narrative but elevates it, making the film's themes of struggle, creativity, and redemption tangible and unforgettable. The dialogue in Ray moves with a rhythm that feels both organic and deliberate, reflecting the film's deep immersion in its characters. Their world is never over the top or showy. Instead, it carries an understated power, capturing the complexity of human emotions behind Ray Charles's larger-than-life persona. The script dances between moments of sharp, sometimes biting wit and raw, vulnerable confession, mirroring the highs and lows of Ray's journey. Naturalism rooted in character is what stands out most. What truly sets this apart is how the dialogue feels rooted in character and context. Conversations don't exist simply to push the plot. They reveal the nuances of relationships, power dynamics, and personal struggles. Ray's speech patterns, cadence, and choice of words paint a picture of a man who is at once confident, guarded, and often bruised beneath the surface. His exchanges with his mother, for instance, are layered with subtext. Their dialogue is turbulent and sometimes fraught, but you can sense a lifetime of love and disappointment packed into every word. These conversations feel lived in, with a mix of unspoken history and emotional restraint that keeps the tension simmering beneath the surface. Wit and charm serve as shields for Ray's public persona. He is charming, witty, and quick on the draw, and the script uses this to great effect. His quips and sharp retorts often serve as armor, deflecting deeper pain or discomfort. There's a playful, almost sly humor in his banter with bandmates and industry figures, which adds texture and lightness without ever undermining the gravity of his personal battles. For example, his interactions with Ahmed Ertegun and other music executives brim with a savvy mix of humor and assertiveness. Ray is clearly a man who knows his worth and isn't afraid to assert it, but the dialogue also reveals the constant negotiation and compromise that his success demands. These moments of verbal sparring feel authentic, adding layers to the power dynamics at play. Emotional weight and confession are also key elements. The film's most memorable dialogue often comes in quieter, more introspective moments where Ray confronts his own demons. The script doesn't shy away from the darker aspects of his life, his addiction, guilt, and loneliness, and the language here is pared down but searing when Ray opens up about his past. His pain is palpable because the dialogue feels earned, never forced or melodramatic. Lines such as, "I lost more than my sight," "I lost my way," resonate deeply because they emerge organically from the story, capturing the themes of loss and redemption without resorting to cliches. These lines offer insight into Ray's fractured psyche, and certain lines in the film linger as thematic anchors. Beyond the moment becoming thematic anchors, for instance, Ray's reflections on blindness aren't just physical descriptions. They serve as metaphors for insight and ignorance, both personal and societal. His assertion that music is his way of seeing crystallizes the film's emotional core, defining his identity and creative vision. Similarly, his mother's tough, uncompromising yet filled with fierce love admonishments echo throughout the film. Her words act as a moral compass for Ray, framing much of his internal conflict and eventual growth. Dialogue serves as the soundtrack to emotion, often feeling like an extension of the film's musical soul. Sometimes it's syncopated and rhythmic, while other times it's slow and haunting. This works in tandem with the score, with pauses and silences becoming just as powerful as spoken words. These silences often follow a charged line or reveal a moment, giving space for emotions to settle, allowing the audience to absorb the weight beneath the surface. Ray's dialogue is more than communication. It's a window into his character, a mirror to his pain and joy, and a thread that ties together the film's intricate emotional tapestry. It's crafted with care, blending sharpness with sensitivity. Through its memorable lines and nuanced exchanges, it brings Ray Charles's extraordinary, complicated life vividly to voice. Ray situates itself firmly within the biographical musical drama genre, but does so with a nuanced touch that both honors and gently pushes against genre conventions. It neither blindly follows the expected beats nor indulges in the familiar cliches that often accompany musical biopics. Instead, the film charts a path that feels authentic, emotionally complex, and richly textured. It introduces fresh ideas while respecting the genre's emotional core. Navigating the biopic terrain at its surface, Ray hits many classic genre markers: the rise from adversity, the transformative power of music, the battle with personal demons, and the eventual redemption arc. These are foundational elements expected in a musical biography, yet the film resists turning them into predictable plot devices. Instead, it embraces the messiness and contradictions of Ray Charles's life, rather than glossing over darker chapters. The film confronts them head-on. Addiction, infidelity, racial tension, and emotional turmoil are explored with unflinching honesty. This commitment to complexity sidesteps the genre's tendency to simplify or glamorize its subject, offering a more nuanced and authentic portrayal. The film portrays Ray's journey as raw and human, anchored in emotional realism. The dramatic core of Ray never feels manufactured or overly sentimental. Moments of tension, whether it's Ray's battles with his mother, his struggles with addiction, or clashes with industry figures, are portrayed with a grounded emotional realism that keeps the audience invested without resorting to melodrama. The film trusts its characters and performances to carry the weight, avoiding the trap of heavy-handed storytelling. This balance is crucial. It maintains the gravitas expected in a drama, but allows for the messiness of real life. Uncertain, complicated, sometimes uncomfortable. The stakes are internal and psychological as much as they are external, which deepens the film beyond the surface-level music legend. Unlike many musical biopics that treat songs as isolated showcases or mere crowd-pleasers, Ray weaves music organically into the storytelling. The performances are not just spectacular interludes. They reflect Ray's evolving emotional state, his conflicts, and his triumphs. Music becomes a language of its own, revealing what dialogue sometimes cannot. This approach revitalizes a familiar genre device, turning the concert scene into a window into character and narrative progression. It avoids the cliched flashiness and disconnected performance montages, instead using music as a vital narrative force that resonates emotionally and thematically. Subtle humor and human moments are also introduced, which feel earned rather than inserted to lighten the mood artificially. The wit in Ray's dialogue and his interactions with friends and colleagues humanize him and create breathing space within the intense drama. These moments are carefully balanced, never undercutting the seriousness but enriching the tone with warmth and personality. This blend of humor and drama sidesteps the genre pitfall of relentless heaviness, offering a more rounded emotional experience that respects the audience's intelligence and emotional bandwidth. It avoids predictability through complexity. The film resists the temptation to offer neat resolutions or formulaic triumphs. Ray's journey is depicted as ongoing and fraught with contradictions, rather than a tidy success story. This subversion of the expected biopic arc invites the audience to engage with the real struggles behind fame rather than consuming a sanitized legend. Pacing and structure reflect the complexity of the subject matter, avoiding the temptation to rush through key events or gloss over setbacks. Instead, the film lingers on moments of vulnerability and conflict, allowing the narrative space to breathe and the emotional impact to deepen. This approach balances genre elements with thematic depth, while the film leans heavily into drama and music. It also incorporates tension and suspense through Ray's personal and professional battles, with the stakes feeling high not from external action sequences, but from the inner turmoil and societal pressures surrounding Ray. This internalized suspense drives the film forward, as Ray must overcome addiction, maintain his relationships, and assert his artistic vision. This approach balances the genre's expectations with a more intimate character-driven form of suspense, reinforcing the film's tone and mood rather than breaking it for spectacle. Genre conventions are acknowledged but never allowed to dictate the storytelling. The film respects its roots while carving out space for complexity, emotional truth, and thematic richness. It's a biopic and musical drama that feels fresh because it embraces imperfection and depth over cliches and formulas. The film weaves genre elements into a cohesive whole that resonates beyond the familiar. Ray isn't just a personal portrait of a musical genius. He's also deeply embedded in the social, political, and cultural fabric of mid-20th century America. The film weaves themes of race segregation and the struggle for dignity and identity throughout its narrative, grounding Ray Charles's story in a broader commentary on the era's turbulent landscape. These issues emerge naturally from the world the film inhabits rather than feeling appended or preachy, creating a layered exploration that resonates beyond the biopic's personal scope. Race and segregation are a subtle but persistent presence in the film, as Ray's life is situated within the harsh realities of Jim Crow America, where racial discrimination shapes daily experiences in profound and often painful ways. This backdrop is never just scenery. It actively informs the conflicts and challenges Ray faces from his childhood in the segregated South to the complexities of navigating the music industry as a Black artist. Issues of race permeate the story organically. For example, scenes showing Ray performing for segregated audiences or confronting discrimination at venues aren't inserted as explicit social commentary moments. Rather, they're woven into the fabric of his journey, illustrating the impact of race on his life. Systemic barriers Ray faces and overcomes, highlighting his resilience, emphasize the challenges of simply existing and succeeding. The film doesn't shy away from showing how these forces shape Ray's identity and worldview, including the tension between embracing Black cultural heritage and appealing to a wider, often white audience. This tension adds depth to the narrative, showcasing how personal and political struggles are intertwined. Navigating fame and exploitation is also explored, delving into the politics of the music business and exposing exploitation and control disguised by glamour. The film subtly critiques how African-American artists like Ray were often ensnared in webs of manipulation, financial, contractual, and personal pressures. His relationships with managers and executives reveal the pressures to conform, commercialize, or compromise artistic integrity, reflecting broader cultural dynamics of power and control. These themes emerge naturally through dialogue and character interaction, allowing the viewer to sense the underlying power imbalances without being lectured about them. This authenticity and respect for the storytelling are further enhanced. Ray's disability and perception are another complex social issue handled with nuance. The film explores not only the physical challenges but also the social attitudes toward disability in that era. It portrays how blindness shapes Ray's experience of the world, his music, and his relationships, highlighting the resilience required to transcend imposed limitations. Instead of sentimentalizing or exploiting his disability, Ray presents it as a facet of his identity, sometimes a source of vulnerability, sometimes a wellspring of strength. The film invites viewers to reconsider assumptions about ability and talent, adding a subtle but powerful cultural commentary. Addiction and personal struggle are also depicted, with Ray's battles with addiction handled with raw honesty that avoids glamorization or simplistic moralizing. The film situates his drug use within the context of pain, trauma, and the pressures of fame, painting a portrait of complexity rather than judgment. This portrayal resonates with broader conversations about substance abuse and mental health, emphasizing the human cost behind public personas. It raises questions about vulnerability, accountability, and redemption that feel relevant across eras. At its core, the film meditates on how cultural identity is expressed and negotiated through art. Ray's fusion of gospel blues, jazz, and soul music is a statement on the power of African American culture to shape and redefine American music. The film celebrates this creative synthesis without ignoring the social struggles that underpin it. Through Ray's story, the film invites reflection on the ways art can be a vehicle for both personal healing and social change. It connects individual experience to collective history, creating a natural integration of themes. None of these themes feel tacked on or forced. They emerge naturally from the characters' lives and the historical moment. The film trusts the audience to grasp the broader significance without explicit commentary. Instead, it embeds social critique within the emotional and narrative flow, allowing the sensitive handling of complex issues like race, disability, and addiction to demonstrate a respect for nuance and avoid simplistic binaries. It acknowledges contradictions and gray areas, reinforcing the film's tone of authenticity and depth. Contemporary issues and cultural politics aren't distractions from the story. They are interwoven with the personal in ways that enrich the narrative and invite ongoing reflection. This makes the film resonate on multiple levels: historical, emotional, and cultural, without ever feeling heavy-handed or artificial. Ray carries an emotional current that pulses steadily beneath its surface, drawing viewers into a deeply human story told through the lens of a music legend's extraordinary life. The film's emotional resonance isn't always loud or overt. Instead, it often whispers through subtle performances, carefully constructed moments, and the raw authenticity of its storytelling. This creates a layered experience where laughter, tears, excitement, and even discomfort arise naturally, inviting the audience to feel alongside Ray rather than simply observe moments of heartfelt vulnerability. One of the film's most affecting qualities is its ability to capture Ray's vulnerability without reducing him to a tragic figure. Scenes depicting his struggles are poignant and moving, leaving a lasting impact on the audience. Childhood blindness and loss carry a quiet weight. There's a restrained sadness in these moments that touches something universal about grief and resilience. The viewer is drawn into the interior world of a boy grappling with loss, fear, and confusion. This early emotional groundwork sets the tone for the film's journey. Later, as Ray wrestles with addiction and personal demons, the film doesn't shy away from exposing his flaws and pain. These scenes elicit empathy and sometimes discomfort, presenting a portrait that is honest rather than sanitized. The emotional truth in these moments creates a tension that lingers, making the triumphs feel earned rather than forced laughter. Interspersed with the wittier themes are flashes of humor, often dry, quick-witted, or sardonic. These moments offer relief and humanize Ray. His playful banter with bandmates, sharp retorts, and moments of self-awareness break through the drama, inviting genuine laughter that feels like a breath of fresh air. These lighter moments deepen emotional engagement by reminding the audience of Ray's complexity. He is not just a tortured genius, but a vibrant, multifaceted individual. The humor never undercuts the drama. Instead, it complements it, creating an emotional rhythm that flows naturally. Music as emotional language is a hallmark of Ray's character. It's more than just performance. It's an emotional language that speaks directly to the soul. Concert scenes and studio sessions are charged with an energy and intensity that go beyond entertainment. They become moments of catharsis, joy, and transcendence when Ray pours himself into his music. The audience is invited to feel the exhilaration, pain, and liberation alongside him. The emotional crescendo of these musical sequences often triggers powerful reactions. Goosebumps, tears, or elation. They tap into the primal connection between music and human feeling. The score and song choices echo Ray's emotional landscape, deepening the impact of key narrative beats, moments of shock, and unflinching honesty. Ray doesn't shy away from moments that jar or shock. Whether it's the raw depiction of drug addiction or the bitter confrontations with family and industry figures, these scenes cut through any romanticizing and force the audience to confront uncomfortable truths about fame, self-destruction, and sacrifice. The unflinching honesty in these portrayals can provoke strong reactions: unease, sadness, or disbelief that linger after the credits roll. This emotional complexity invites reflection on the cost of genius and the realities of the music industry. Behind the myth, the film invites reflection and discussion. Its emotional depth and thematic richness naturally invite deeper contemplation. Viewers may find themselves reconsidering ideas about talent, disability, race, and redemption long after watching. The nuanced portrayal of relationships, especially between Ray and his mother or romantic partners, sparks contemplation about love's complexities and the interplay of support and control. The film resists tidy resolutions, opening space for discussion rather than closure. The imperfections and contradictions in Ray's life encourage repeated viewings to unpack layers of meaning and emotion that may not be fully grasped the first time. Sustained emotional engagement is maintained through the emotional pacing of Ray, which carefully balances moments of intensity with quieter introspective beats. This rhythm allows the audience to connect deeply with the characters' inner worlds and the broader social context shaping their lives, rather than relying on melodrama or spectacle. The film builds emotional resonance through authenticity, subtlety, and powerful performances. This makes the experience feel intimate, as if the audience is being granted access to the private struggles and triumphs of an iconic figure. Some Ray moves beyond the surface biography to craft an emotional journey that is as complex, compelling, and human as its subject. It elicits a wide spectrum of feelings: laughter, sorrow, excitement, discomfort, all woven together in a way that lingers, challenges, and invites connection. The film's emotional heartbeat creates an immersive and enduring experience, prompting viewers to reflect and return. Ray occupies a distinctive space in the biographical musical drama genre, standing out among its peers by blending the rawness of a personal struggle with the grandeur of a musical legend's journey. Compared to other biopics, especially those centered on musicians, it offers a textured and unvarnished portrayal that both honors and complicates the familiar formula. This film's approach is reflective of director Taylor Hackford's sensibilities, carving a unique identity within his filmography while engaging with genre conventions in a way that feels both respectful and refreshing. Biopic genre beyond the typical blueprint. Many musical biopics tend to lean heavily on predictable arcs: early hardship, meteoric rise, personal demons, and eventual redemption or downfall. While Ray touches upon these elements, he also offers a fresh perspective. On these beats, the film resists the glossy or sanitized retellings often found in the genre. It embraces gritty realism and delves into darker, less glamorous aspects of addiction, fractured relationships, racial tension, and more. This sense of authenticity is rare in similar films, unlike some biopics that reduce their subjects to mythic proportions. Ray embraces complexity, not just celebrating the music or fame, but exploring the cost, contradictions, and vulnerabilities beneath the surface. This nuanced lens gives the film a layered emotional texture that invites deeper engagement beyond a simple rise and fall story. In relation to other music biopics, when placed alongside notable films like Walk the Line, Johnny Cash, La Bamba, Richie Valens, or Bohemian Rhapsody, Freddie Mercury and Ray stands out. It synthesizes personal struggle and cultural context, while many films focus heavily on the music or the star's charisma. Ray balances musical passion with sharp insights into race, disability, and identity in a way few others attempt with comparable depth. The film's musical sequences don't feel like interruptions but rather narrative vessels carrying emotional and thematic weight. This integration enhances the storytelling and distinguishes it from biopics where performances feel more like set pieces. Taylor Hackford's directorial style is marked by his ability to humanize larger-than-life figures, as seen in his films Officer and a Gentleman and Dolores Claiborne. Fits within this tradition but pushes deeper into the biopic realm, blending his skill at crafting intimate character studies with a sprawling narrative of cultural significance. Unlike Hackford's other work, is notable for its intricate layering of personal and historical context, maintaining a gritty yet compassionate tone. The film showcases Hackford's flair for pacing, emotional rhythm, and eliciting powerhouse performances, particularly from Jamie Foxx, who anchors the movie in both spectacle and authenticity. Biopics often risk tipping too far into either celebration or tragedy, but Ray walks a careful line between those poles. Its tone is reflective and grounded, never succumbing to overt melodrama or hagiography. This balanced mood allows the film to maintain tension and emotional depth while honoring the joyous, life-affirming aspects of Ray Charles's music and spirit. The film's mood also reflects the turbulent times in which Ray lived, racial strife, social upheaval, and personal challenges, all coloring the film's emotional landscape. This atmospheric grounding adds a layer of historical weight uncommon in many genre counterparts, offering something new while Ray employs familiar narrative structures. Through the depth of character exploration and cultural nuance, the film refuses to simplify Ray Charles into just a musical genius or tragic figure. Instead, it portrays him as a complex human navigating conflicting identities and pressures. The film's unflinching portrayal of disability and addiction set against a backdrop of racial injustice provides a broader social commentary that elevates it beyond a straightforward biopic. The layered soundtrack, which doesn't just showcase Ray's hits but also conveys emotional and narrative subtext, adds another dimension to its innovation within the genre. In a crowded field of musical biographies, remains distinctive for its emotional rawness, cultural insight, and refusal to conform entirely to expectations. It blends the conventions audiences anticipate, musical triumph, personal struggle, with a nuanced portrait that feels less like myth-making and more like honest storytelling. Within Hackford's body of work, Ray represents a high watermark in terms of complexity and emotional resonance. This synergy makes it stand out not only in the genre but also in the director's URA. Ray is a film that simultaneously honors and reinvents the musical biopic, weaving familiar elements into a richly textured and emotionally compelling whole. It offers something new not by breaking all the rules, but by deepening and complicating them, presenting a story as multifaceted and vibrant as the man at its center. Ray unfolds not just as a straightforward biopic, but as a tapestry woven with deeper layers of meaning, subtle visual cues, and recurring motifs that enrich its narrative and thematic complexity. These elements aren't flashy or overt but quietly blend into the film's texture, inviting attentive viewers to uncover nuanced insights that resonate with the movie's tone. Raw, intimate, and reflective. Blindness, both metaphorically and as a motif, is the most obvious yet deeply resonant element. Beyond the literal loss of sight, the film uses this condition as a metaphor for perception, insight, and the limits of understanding for Ray himself and those around him. His blindness compels him to perceive the world differently, turning to sound, memory, and intuition as guides. Visually and narratively, moments where light and shadow play around Ray underscore this motif. For example, scenes often emphasize contrasts, bright flashes, blurred edges, or darkened frames, to suggest how Ray navigates a world that is both visually and emotionally complex. This visual language subtly reinforces themes of isolation and connection, vulnerability, and strength. Blindness also ties into the theme of internal vision. Ray's ability to envision and create music that transcends physical limitations suggests that true insight is not about what the eyes see but what the heart and mind perceive. Music, as a narrative thread and emotional language, operates as a recurring motif throughout the film, serving as both a storytelling device and a symbol. Ray's piano, in particular, is more than an instrument. It's an extension of himself, a source of comfort, expression, and escape. Frequent shots linger on his hands gliding over keys, underscoring music's role as a lifeline and form of communication beyond words. The juxtaposition of silence and sound is also telling. Moments of quiet often precede or follow bursts of music, creating emotional tension and release. This rhythmic interplay mirrors the internal struggles of the characters. The silences hint at pain, loss, or uncertainty, while the music embodies resilience and joy. Music motifs recur throughout the film, sometimes subtly like a melodic fragment echoing in the background, reminding the viewer of Ray's persistent creative spirit even amid chaos. Family and memory are central to the film's emotional core. Visual cues reinforce the weight of memory and legacy. Photographs, home videos, and archival footage are integrated with dramatized scenes, blending past and present to evoke the persistence of family bonds despite distance or conflict. These juxtapositions invite viewers to contemplate the enduring impact of family relationships. Reflection on how the past shapes identity. The film often frames Ray in environments that recall childhood or earlier times, visually suggesting that his origins continually inform his adult self. Objects like the worn piano in his childhood home or the simple photographs of family members become anchors, motifs that evoke the persistence of memory amidst change, light and darkness, emotional symbolism. Cinematographically, the film plays with contrasts of light and darkness to underscore Ray's emotional and psychological landscape. Scenes set in dimly lit clubs or shadowed hotel rooms evoke the loneliness and vulnerability beneath the glamour, while brightly lit performances or moments of personal breakthrough shimmer with a sense of liberation and hope. This motif resonates with the thematic tension between struggle and triumph, despair and joy. Light doesn't simply symbolize happiness. It becomes a more nuanced indicator of revelation, clarity, or moments of emotional truth. Darkness, similarly, is never purely negative but suggests mystery, complexity, and the unknown facets of Ray's life. Addiction, as a recurring cycle, emerges as a cyclical motif, reflecting the repetitive nature of Ray's struggles. Scenes showing him slipping into addiction or withdrawal are often mirrored or echoed by similar images later in the film, visually suggesting an unending battle. The film doesn't glamorize or dramatize addiction. Instead, it presents it as an almost rhythmic undercurrent, an unfortunate companion to creative brilliance. This cyclical motif deepens the narrative's emotional impact, highlighting themes of vulnerability, self-destruction, and the possibility or difficulty of redemption. Clothing and appearance serve as identity markers. Ray's evolving style, his hat suits, and his sunglasses become subtle motifs linked to identity and persona. His sunglasses, in particular, become a kind of shield or mask, symbolizing both protection from the world and a crafted image. The film often draws attention to these accessories, using them as visual shorthand for the tension between public persona and private self. Changes in his attire reflect shifts in mood, status, or emotional state, quietly communicating internal transformation without words. Recurring visual motifs in framing and composition throughout the film include close-ups on Ray's face or hands, which convey intimacy and focus on his inner life. These tight framings invite the audience into his subjective experience, reinforcing the film's tone of closeness and emotional rawness. Conversely, wider framing allows for a broader perspective, revealing more of the surrounding environment and enhancing the overall visual impact of the film. Shots often situate him within crowded, chaotic environments, such as stage performances, recording studios, or bustling cities, highlighting the isolation that can coexist with fame and public attention. This push-pull in framing enhances themes of solitude and connection, visibility, and invisibility. The narrative echoes in circular structure, while the film follows a mostly linear timeline, occasionally circling back to earlier moments or motifs through flashbacks, musical reprises, or thematic callbacks. This structural choice creates a sense of continuity and reinforces the idea that Ray's story, like music, is cyclical, built on layers of repetition and variation. These echoes enrich the storytelling by encouraging viewers to see connections across time and experience, enhancing the film's reflective, meditative quality. Subtle layers, visual cues, motifs, and symbolic elements work together to deepen the audience's understanding of the protagonist and the world he inhabits. They invite viewers to engage beyond the surface, discovering meaning in the interplay of light and shadow, sound, and silence. This intricate weaving of detail elevates the film from a biography to a richly textured exploration of human complexity and artistic spirit. Ray stands as a historical film deeply rooted in the rich and complex landscape of mid-century America, particularly reflecting the cultural, social, and racial dynamics of the time. Although it isn't part of a series, its contribution to the broader cinematic narrative of African American history and musical legacy is significant. It offers an immersive window into the era and the life of one of its most influential figures. Historical immersion through setting and context is achieved through the film's painstaking reconstruction of the environments that shaped Ray Charles, from the segregated South of his childhood in Florida to the bustling, racially charged music scenes of New Orleans, Seattle, and Los Angeles. The production design and location choices immerse the viewer in a world where racial segregation and systemic inequality are not just backdrop but active forces influencing every aspect of life. The careful attention to period detail, from vintage cars and clothing styles to signage and interior decor, creates an authentic atmosphere that grounds the film's narrative in a palpable reality. This visual accuracy transports the audience into the lived experience of the 1940s. Through the 1960s, a period marked by both vibrant cultural innovation and harsh racial barriers, cultural and social realities become narrative forces in the film. It does not treat historical context as mere window dressing, but rather embeds Ray's personal story within the larger currents of American history. Racial segregation, the civil rights movement, and the evolving music industry. Moments where Ray confronts discrimination, whether refusing to play segregated venues or facing industry exploitation, resonate with the lived experience of many Black artists at the time. These scenes highlight the systemic barriers that shaped not only Ray's career but the broader struggle for racial equality. This historical grounding adds weight and urgency to the narrative, making Ray's achievements not just personal triumphs but acts of cultural resistance. While the film strives for historical accuracy, it also takes creative liberties typical of biopics to condense timelines, dramatize events, and enhance emotional impact. Some relationships and incidents are simplified or heightened to serve the storytelling rhythm, but these choices do not undermine the film's immersive quality. Instead, they focus the narrative on key emotional truths and thematic arcs. The portrayal of Ray's relationships, addiction, and career milestones captures the essence of his life, even if not every detail aligns perfectly with the historical record. Jamie Foxx doesn't just play Ray Charles. He disappears into him with a level of immersion that transcends the screen. Traditional acting takes a transformative turn in this performance. It's not about surface imitation or mimicry, though Foxx masterfully captures the physical mannerisms and idiosyncrasies that made Ray Charles unique. The subtle gait, the distinctive sway of his body as he moves, and the half-smile that conceals as much as it reveals these external details provide a foundation. But the true power lies beneath in the emotional depth and complexity Foxx brings to a man whose eyes no longer see the world but feel it intensely. Foxx's performance is a study in controlled restraint.